Recording. Yeah. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry for the delay. I'd like to welcome you all to the March 12th APCD Planning and Policy Committee meeting. Madam Clerk, do you mind calling the roll?
Thank you, Chair Birkbeck Garcia. I would like to note for the record that Member Koval has notified us that she will be absent from today's proceedings. All remaining committee members are participating in person. With that, Member Duncan.
Present, thank you.
Member Fitzgerald.
Present.
Member Stigler Granados. Chair Birkbeck Garcia.
Here. Thank you. Madam Clerk, item B is non-agenda public communication. Are there any members of the public that wish to address the committee?
Thank you, Chair Birkbeck Garcia. I note for the record that per the Governing Board Rules of Procedure or Administrative Code, requests to speak for this item are no longer accepted, and we have received no request for public testimony under this item.
Great. Moving along, item C, approval of the January 8th, 2026 Statement of Proceedings. Madam Clerk, are there any members of the public that wish to address the committee on this item?
Again, requests to speak are no longer accepted for this item, and we have received no request to speak for this item.
Do any of my colleagues have any comments on our statement of proceedings from our January 8th meeting?
No, thank you.
Great. Would anyone like to call a motion to approve the statement of proceedings?
I'll make that motion. Thank you.
Great. I'll second. Great. Can we just vote with ayes? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. With members Koval and Stigler Granados absent, that motion passes with those committee members who are present voting aye.
Okay, on to the main part of this meeting. Agenda item D. D1 is the San Diego Air Pollution Control District's 2026 legislative program for recommended positions on proposed legislation. Madam Clerk, could you please provide the public testimony announcement?
Thank you, Chair Birkbeck Garcia. I would note for the record again that requests to speak are no longer accepted for this item. Any requests that have already been submitted will be heard at the conclusion of the staff presentation.
Thank you. Ms. Forbes?
Thank you, Chair Birkbeck Garcia and committee members. Today, we're presenting staff recommended positions for several state legislative bills relevant to SDAPCD's 2026 legislative program. These recommendations align with the priorities identified by the governing board on February 12th, 2026 as part of its approval of the program. Next slide, please. So just starting with a quick background, on February 12th, the governing board adopted the 2026 legislative program. The program identifies the legislative priorities for the upcoming year, including seeking additional and increased funding sources, responding to the Tijuana River Valley crisis, ensuring equitable compensation for CAR board members from local districts, and addressing indirect sources of emissions. These priorities advance SDAPCD's mission to protect public health and improve air quality, facilitate attainment of state and federal clean air standards, maximize control of local emission sources, and ensure adequate funding to meet operational needs. We're here today to present recommendation positions on legislation related to these priorities and guidelines to be considered by this committee. Next slide, please. So we'll start with 4 pieces of legislation for which we're recommending a support position. First of these is Assembly Bill 35 from Assemblymember David Alvarez. This bill relates to the funding allocated by the Safe Drinking Water, Wildfire Prevention, Drought Preparedness, and Clean Air Bond of 2024, which was approved by the voters as Prop 4 at the November 5th, 2024 statewide general election. So this proposition authorized the issuance of bonds in the amount of $10 billion for projects supporting safe drinking water, drought, flood, and water resilience. and clean air programs, among many other priorities. The bill would exempt program guidelines from the Administrative Procedure Act to accelerate funding distribution. This would help expedite clean air and water projects, including efforts related to the Tijuana River Valley, notably some of the work that's being planned for the hotspot at Saturn Boulevard to be able to address the turbulence issues there. So staff is recommending a support position on this bill. Next slide, please. The next one is Assembly Bill 1777, and this one would relate to indirect sources. So one of our legislative guidelines, Air Quality number 14, would support legislation that clarifies CARB's authority to address indirect sources. And this bill basically states, it's very short, it states that it's declaratory of existing law and that CARB can regulate such sources of pollution. It reinforces the capacity to regulate emissions if needed to address federal air quality standards. And if you recall, the previous legislation that was being considered last year would have required CARB to regulate indirect sources of pollution. Instead, this legislation would merely clarify their authority to do so, but not require it. And so because of the consistency with the guideline that's in the program, we're recommending a support position on this legislation as well. Next slide, please. So this bill is also a 2-year bill that we supported last year. This is the Salache bill related to regional air quality incident response programs. And this would require CARB to expand its existing incident monitoring program and establish regional air quality incident response centers, including one at South Coast AQMD. And we see this as a, staff views this as a huge potential for us to be able to take advantage of those resources, entering into an agreement with South Coast to provide additional incident response here in San Diego County if needed. It would require additional support from the legislature in the form of revenue, but at this time, the legislation has been amended in such a way that would allow for the establishment of these centers if the revenue were identified. And then it mandates coordination between CARB and air districts during air quality emergencies. So we're again this year recommending a support position on this legislation. Next slide, please. And so the last one of the recommended support positions is SB 58, which is by Senator Padilla. This would require the California Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, or OEHA, to develop health-based or to update its health-based hydrogen sulfide standards by January 1 of 2030. Currently, those standards that are in place have not been updated since 1999 and 2000. So this would require them to update them based on current science. It also would express state intent to develop guidelines for CARB and local districts to respond to impacts from hydrogen sulfide. And again, aligns with SDAPCD's priorities to focus on the Tijuana River Valley hydrogen sulfide crisis. What we're recommending here is that we continue to work with the author's office. We have been in close communication with them and would recommend a position of supporting with amendments. We're working with the author as well as with other air districts, since the other focus of this bill is hydrogen sulfide impacts in the Salton Sea area. So we're working with other air districts on this and want to make sure that any costs to districts would come along with funding so that there wouldn't be unfunded mandates associated with the legislation. All right, so that concludes the support positions that we're recommending. And for next, I'm going to turn it over to Melina to talk about our opposed recommendations as well as our watch positions.
Can I ask a question on your presentation before we move on, Chair? I mean, these are clarifying questions, so it's not discussion. Thank you. So on the one we were just looking at there about this one here, I guess I'm not sure what language you're looking for. I guess if they Because when I read this, it says express state intent to develop guidelines to respond, but they don't tell you what they are.
That's right. And so that's
And then if what-
one of the suggested amendments that we would be working on with the author's office is either to move that language to the intent language that at some point down the road, the state could determine that. And there may be additional language that's forthcoming to bear that out. So at this point, we don't know exactly what those what that intent would require. And so that's something that we want to continue to work on the authors.
Then that would lead
work
to
on
the
with
second point that you mentioned, which is if it's actions that this agency has to take, if it's costly, who would bear the costs or how would those costs be recoverable or paid, et cetera?
That's correct. Currently, the legislation uses the exemption of there's no cost recovery required because districts are allowed to recover costs through permit fees. In the case of the Tijuana River Valley, there's no one that we could attach permit fees to for those efforts. So we would want to make sure that, like you say, any other costs that would be flowing down to the districts that couldn't be recovered from permit fees would be coming from the state.
Thank you for that clarification.
All right, I'm gonna be going over, we just have one bill for oppose. Just can hear me. Okay. Next slide. The first bill that we have for oppose would be AB 17, actually only bill, AB 1791, and this bill would prohibit CARB and South Coast AQMD from adopting any regulations that would increase gas prices, raise residential construction costs, and that would also include non-residential buildings as well. This would also require both agencies to demonstrate any compliance with these caps to the legislature. While this doesn't directly affect APCD, we are choosing to oppose it just because it could set a precedent that it could spread to other air districts and could spread statewide, and we would just limit our authority. Next slide, please. Next, I'm going to be going over the list to watch, and these are bills that we have not taken a position at this time just because there's not enough information, and the committee can take a position at a later date as well. Next slide. Sorry, what happened? The first one is AB 1584, and this one would establish a civil rights office within CARB, and it would require training on civil rights obligations to board staff, grantees, contractors, and subrecipients. It would also require CARB to post online an annual summary of information regarding the office, including a summary of civil rights complaints that have been received. This bill, we're watching it just because it could create duplicate compliance obligations for the districts, including APCD. At this time, it does not include air districts, but there is the potential that it could include air districts.
That's a clarifying question.
Mhm.
Do they state anywhere in their, bill intent or the author, what is the problem they're trying to solve? Because I mean, generally everybody would be like, hey, we want civil rights. We want them to be enforced. We support civil rights, but are we creating one at Sandag? Are we creating one at, every single agency I'm not sure what they're trying to do.
The author has not made that known at this time. But it is coming from the author,
Okay, thank you.
this bill.
And if I could just add on to that. So in discussions at CAPCOA, it's been discussed that CARB is generally trying, or not CARB, but the author's office is trying to address internal issues within CARB. However, there are also provisions that could apply to local districts because it does have language in there that CARB would coordinate a statewide civil rights approach with local air districts. And so that's what's giving us some concern and need to watch it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I agree with watching it or opposing it potentially if I understood it, because again, like internally in CARB, I don't know what's going on that they're trying to solve. I think a lot of people would look at this and say, oh, they're trying to make sure it's equitable in the community with the actions of the agencies, which we already have as our policy. It seems like there's other tools if there's internal issues with CARB. So anyways, that was, and I say these because it's not discussion time, but just because if there's some other illuminating information.
Right. And we, as the Air District, already have requirements on us to comply with Civil Rights Act. And so we have programs in place to allow for discrimination complaints and things like that. So again, the concern that there might be some inconsistency that could flow down from it.
Next slide, please. Next one is AB 2752, and this is currently a spot bill, but it's aimed at increasing oversight of Bay Area and South Coast AQMDs. More language isn't available yet, but we'll go ahead and keep watching it to see if anything comes up. And we're just watching this one because again, it could also affect potentially SDAPCD's authority in the future. Next slide, please. And the last one that we have on our watch list is Senate Bill 1075. And this is another spot bill, which relates to the AB 617 Community Air Protection Program. And it's relating to the provisions that are related to the community emission reduction programs. And these are the guidelines that are set in order to reduce emissions in AB 617 communities. At this time, we don't have additional information, but we are watching it. And this because it could affect any of the environmental justice or air quality guidelines within the program. And now I will toss it back to Paula to kind of wrap up the presentation.
Great. Thank you, Melina. And so we have listed here the requested actions for the committee. Basically, the role of the committee is to decide whether to take the recommended actions from staff and then to report that to the board. So that would occur at the report out at the April board meeting. And so the requested actions are support positions on the 4 bills that we outlined here, as well as an opposed position on AB 1791 as Melina outlined. And then we would, like I say, continue to watch the other legislation as well. So thank you, and we're happy to answer any additional questions you have.
Thank you, staff. Madam Clerk, are there any members of the public that want to address the committee on this item?
Thank you, Chair Burkbeck Garcia. We have 2 members of the public that wish to address the board or the committee on this item. I'll call forward Jack Munger. You'll have 3 minutes to address the board. Please begin by stating your name for the record, and you can use the timer on the screen to self-regulate your time.
Thank you, Chair, member of the committee. My name is Jack Munger. IEA, as we're known, regulatory compliance for manufacturing companies in the city. Advocacy workshop very soon here on May 7th. I'm here today representing several members of the ISR work group, IEA, the regional chamber, San Diego regional ILP, and the Working Water Fund. By saying I really appreciate the fact that we now have a program at this body that is looking at legislation in a good investment. Otherwise, we're operating on the blind eye down here, not knowing what may be helping us or harming us in Sacramento in the form of legislation. So, activity. But collectively, with regard to the coalition mentioned, issue to take, and that was with the following reasons. For all intents and purposes, this is a spot bill. It has next to no details, no information. It hasn't even been given its first policy hearing yet. Secondly, there's no evidence existing that indirect source rules provide emission reductions promise. We're certainly not seeing that study, which was recently evaluating LA's South Coast, ISR concluded that the ISR has failed to produce reductions and has been significantly more costly than projected. Note that that study regarding excessive program costs concur with our own district's white paper published here just that the cost of an ISR would be very extensive and very limited. A lot of businesses in the coast area who wish there had been an ISR that was given by our own district. A different outcome. Finally, if we learned anything from the past 2.5 years of evaluating prospects for an ISR like South Coast Square Program, that one size does not fit all. San Diego is very different from LA and the Riverside region. Statewide ISR would be extremely problematic if the same standards were applied to every district in the state. These challenges, San Diego has an international border, for example. And it would be our best interest to see that a bill like AB 1777 acknowledged that fact and included details as to how a statewide program would provide for the unique circumstance for air district in the state. AB 1777 does not include any such language or explanation. We respectfully request that you vote.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Alejandra Miat-Iteran. You'll have 3 minutes to address the board, and you can self-regulate your time using the timer on the screen.
Alejandra Miat-Iteran, I'm the Executive Director of the OTAN Institute. First of all, I'm also here to talk about AB 17. I want to clarify, our board has not taken a position on this because there's so little information on it. I do want to relate it to the indirect source rule. I want to thank Paula and her staff for making for allowing us to participate in this coalition for many months now with the staff, and we really appreciate it. I want to say we have experience with CARB regarding the advanced clean fleets regulation, and I can tell you they completely ignored the border. I mean, when we actually asked them, do you realize what's going on in Mexico and trade and the issues there, they're like, I have no idea what's going on in Mexico. These are the people drafting the regulation. So we're very concerned that CARB would be in charge of drafting an indirect source rule that does not contemplate the challenges in our border area. Specifically, you've been tackling the Tijuana River Valley issue, and you can understand that our border region is very unique. And I'll give you one example. One thing that I think we should be working on, and I really doubt that CARB would include this in their policy, is, for example, in Otay Mesa, an appointment system at the Otay Mesa cargo. This would basically eliminate 3,000 trucks that are idling exactly on the US-Mexico border. So we're actually breathing that pollution. And it would also support economic development. These are the programs that I think APCD, I know it's not their issue, and it's a federal issue, but I think we could appreciate the leadership through either your participation with Sandex, the board members on supporting that, or even working with the federal agencies to make this a reality. I just think there's some unique things that we can do to tackle pollution and that also support economic development. And I don't think CARB will be doing it.
Thank you. That concludes public testimony on this item.
Sorry, do any of my colleagues have any comments or like to discuss this further? Member Fitzgerald and then Member Duncan.
Thank you, and thank you for the speakers. That too is a concern of mine, and I think everything you said was spot on, especially being one of the busiest ports of entry, with Mexico into the US, and busiest port of entry, and how that contributes to just the rise in emissions, and also for us to be passing this. I mean, first of all, the bill is not quite clear. There's too much room to that's left to interpretation. So that's one of my concerns. Also, for us to take on having to pay for what's happening at the border in Mexico, that we have to think about increasing the cost of living of those here in San Diego that are going to be impacted by that. So a lot of good points. But really, just the lack of detail in the bill is concerning, that I really don't see a lot that I'd be able to support and think that we could vote on today. And so I'm really of the mindset that that's not something that we should be supporting right now. Maybe it should be continued. I'm interested to hear what my colleague, Mr. Duncan, has to say about that.
Thank you. My comments on the whole presentation are as follows. I appreciate the explanation. I did have one question. I don't know if staff knows if they could add it on AB 1777. Are they planning on adding more language? Do we know? Like, is it not gone to committee? Is that what was said? Because for me, when I look at it, it says legislature finds and declares that paragraph 1 is declaratory of and does not constitute a change in existing law. Generally, I wouldn't support anything like that if the law already says it. But anyways, I'm sorry, I asked you a question. I'm sorry, Paula.
No,
Have any-
thank you. So at this time, I have not heard of more language being added to it. But it is early in the process. It is supposed to go to hearing on the 23rd, Assembly Natural Resources. So, but we aren't seeing any different language than what is in front of you.
Okay, so I'll just briefly state sort of my approach and my belief how I should analyze bills when I'm in this position is one, I have my own sort of personal feelings on the bills of whether they're good or bad. And then two, I look at how it affects our agency and what other board members might feel, which would be different than me. So if my feeling is, hey, I want to oppose this, but I look at it, other members, they may not want to oppose it. Where is if it's not really clear, where's the appropriate position I should take, and it's different if we're all as the whole board, looking at it and want to really get into it. So for me with this, when I look at both AB 1777 as well as the matter that we are going to vote on to oppose, which is the recommendation for both of those, for me would be, or I will make it as a motion if it's appropriate, not trying to cut discussion or anything or call a vote, but I would think I'd make the motion that we support the ones that were recommended by staff for support, take no position at this time on AB 177, and on one that was recommended to oppose, take a no position on that one as well. And the reason, just to elaborate on why I would recommend that, is when I look at it, it was, well, it may set a precedent, for the future. And that is certainly sometimes when things happen, they happen to get it expanded like 1777 could. But for me, it's not clear in there that would be the case. And generally, I would support it individually. So support it as opposed to oppose it. So I'm trying to find the appropriate compromise in this role is for our board. If it's not something that's really germane to the operation of the agency, then to take a no position on it is how I analyze it. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was a motion that hadn't been seconded.
Before I speak, I'll go ahead and second that motion. Member Duncan was able to put into words very clearly what has been racking my brain all morning as I was going through some of these assembly bills. I am concerned about taking a stand on a bill that does not have the language tied down yet. So whether it's a support or an oppose, I don't know, because I don't know what I'm supporting and I don't know what I'm opposing quite yet with the way they have things worded. So I also would like to, sorry, I'm just not as clear in words as Member Duncan is, but I would like to not take a position on AB 177. I am okay with the supporting of the other legislation that staff put forward. I also agree with Assembly Bill 1791. I did have some questions on that. So basically, where they're saying prohibits any rules adding more than. So is there a rule right now that we can add per gallon of gasoline or add to home construction costs? Is this like putting a cap on it, or what does that wording exactly mean? Where it says prohibits any rule adding on more than 2 cents per gallon of gasoline or 2,000 to home construction costs.
Yeah, so the language would say, notwithstanding any other law, South Coast cannot adopt any regulation or rule that would add more than 2 cents to gallon of gas, $2,000 to build a home, $5,000 to build a non-residential building, And then South Coast would have to submit data to the policy committees of the
Mhm.
legislature. So right now, for context, how a rule, there's also provisions in the health and safety code about air districts and when they make a rule, and you've seen this yourselves when
Correct.
you've adopted rules where it does the socioeconomic analysis, and there's a lot of analysis that the rules team does to look at the effects on the different businesses that will be regulated by the rule. So there already is existing analysis of economic effects of the rules. Here, what this would do would add an additional layer on just the cost to like the consumer down the road, right? So like, for example, we have vapor recovery rules, which address regulations at gas stations,
Mhm.
and it would affect the gas station operators, like their cost, right, to comply with the rules. It seems like this would also add that additional layer, which would be kind of an additional hoops to kind of for the rules team to jump through.
And additional caps on what those rules could do. And so, so here you've got home construction costs, non-residential construction costs. This could relate to boilers. They could relate to other types of equipment, appliances, things like that. So I think that is probably the genesis of this legislation are those types of programs in South Coast. And again, I think it's more the concept of the concern of the legislature taking away the local authority of air districts in a way that is a fairly blunt instrument and would require a lot of additional analysis beyond what air districts are already required to do as part of the standard rulemaking like Heidi was talking about.
And then sorry for all the questions on this. Requires compliance reporting to legislators. So that means what? We have to report what kind of compliance to legislature?
So it looks like that would require South Coast to submit to the policy committees of the legislature that shows, like their analysis would have to show how the regulation would meet with these standards. It would have to go through any new regulation that they are wanting to adopt, how it meets this, and this.
Member Duncan.
Thank you. Just a quick clarification on that. I just want to make sure I'm understanding it correctly. When I looked at the language and then on here, it's talking about not cumulative, right? It's talking about a new regulation. So there, there could be, 10 regulations that are each $4,500 or, for non-residential, or for residential, there could be, 15 that are, 1,900 or whatever, or ones that are already in existence. It's talking, or that are even higher, but it's talking about any new ones on like an individual home, not going 2,000 or over, right? Like on any individual rules.
Right. That's
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we didn't think it was like cumulative, that the agency already has like 2 rules, because that would be crazy, in my opinion. But like for me, can I do policy advocacy? So for me, I'm not even reaching fully whether I would vote to oppose it or support it. For me, what I'm looking at it is South Coast Air Quality Management has this potential in front of them. And yes, it could come to us, but I won't vote to support something unless I believe in the current effect on this agency and whether I support it or am negative, against it. So that's why I was for the no position, because I don't have in front of me data that's saying, hey, in the last 10 years, South Coast Air Quality Management District or our agency has put forth, 5 regulations on homes that are well over 2,000. And now if this passes, we're going to really change how we operate, because I don't believe that's accurate either. Well, that's my guess, but I don't know. But regardless, those regulations are not impacted. It's just future. So anyways, that not to reiterate too much, I just wanted to explain a little bit more the reason why I was, in my motion that's pending is to take no position.
Madam Clerk?
I just wanted to note for the record that during the committee discussion, member Stickler Granados joined the meeting.
One more question before we go forward.
Absolutely.
Thank you. The other question I had is I was curious if the clerk or staff or our attorney could tell whether or not on my motion where, I have the support and, my non-position on the two items, do we need to address the monitor ones at all in the motion, or are those not necessary for the motion? The ones that staff recommended to just continue to monitor? If we
Oh,
agree.
No,
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 because, yeah.
Thank you.
No,
Just
you
want
don't.
to clarify so it's clean. Thank you.
Was,
Go ahead.
so was that a no motion that you made?
So the motion was a cumulative motion, I believe, to support the 3 of the 4 that staff recommended we support,
Mhm.
to take a no position on 1777 and a no position on AB 1791, which is one they recommended support.
Could I clarify
Of course,
the motion? Is that no position or is that an opposed
they
position?
were, both of the changes were to no position. To not take a
Do
position.
not take, so
Correct.
watch or just no
Yes, to watch,
position at
yes.
On both.
Correct.
Okay, I would second.
There's a second by Chair Burkett Garcia.
Yeah, yes, and that's how I understood it when I
Okay, for
seconded it.
both? Okay.
Yes. Okay, any other? Yes,
Sorry, my apologies because I ran in late.
It's okay.
Could you just recap what I've read over the policies? If you could just recap real quick the motion of what you all are considering.
correct. Go ahead, Member Duncan.
So there up on the board was the staff's recommendations for AB 35 from Alvarez, the Assemblymember Alvarez. So my motion includes the support of that bill as staff recommended. On AB 1777, my motion includes to not take a position on AB 1777. On AB 2349 is to agree with staff's recommendation and to support it in the motion. On SB 58, the Padilla bill was also to agree with the staff recommendation and to support that bill as well. And on the staff recommendation to oppose AB 1791 was to not take a position on that, is what's in my motion as opposed to opposing it.
Any further questions or comments? No? Okay, let's take a vote. All in favor of Member Duncan's motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Madam Clerk?
Thank you. With member Koval absent, that motion passes with those committee members who are present voting aye.
Great. And before we adjourn, did anyone have anything else they want to add before we close this meeting? Nope. Okay. Well, that was a brief meeting for us. I'd like to adjourn this month's Planning and Policy Committee meeting. The next meeting will be held on May 14th, 2026. And I want to thank everybody for welcoming me on this committee for the past few years, but this is my last meeting with you guys for planning and policy at least. Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
And if I can just add, we will adjust the time of that meeting because we also have the evening budget meeting. So if it looks like this will be another short meeting, we would start it at 4 p.m. instead of 2, but the clerk will put out notice well in advance.
And I'll reach out to you. Just want to give you a heads up to everybody in the room. There's a chance I may have to miss that meeting because my son's graduating from University of Pennsylvania with his master's that day.